Good evening, I am Sal Pierre reporting on President Biden wanting to take Cuba off the terrorism designation in exchange for prisoner release. In a significant shift in U.S.-Cuba relations, President Joe Biden has informed Congress of his plan to remove Cuba from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. This decision is part of a deal brokered by the Catholic Church that will lead to the release of numerous political prisoners in Cuba. Senior U.S. officials, speaking anonymously, revealed that dozens of prisoners, who the U.S. considers unjustly detained, will be freed by the end of President Biden's term, which concludes at noon on January 20th. Along with the release of these prisoners, the U.S. is expected to ease some of the economic sanctions imposed on Cuba, including a 2017 measure that strengthened the U.S. stance toward the island nation under President Donald Trump. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre explained that these actions were taken to encourage dialogue between Cuba and the Catholic Church and to support human rights in Cuba, an effort praised by many Latin American leaders. Meanwhile, Cuba's foreign ministry confirmed that the government plans to release 553 individuals convicted of various crimes. Although it was not directly tied to the U.S. move, the release will occur gradually, in line with legal and humanitarian considerations. However, this change is expected to be short-lived. With President-elect Donald Trump set to take office next week and his close ally Marco Rubio nominated as Secretary of State, there are strong indications that the decision could be reversed quickly. Rubio has long been a proponent of tougher sanctions on Cuba, and his influence will likely shape future U.S. policy. Trump's administration had reinstated Cuba's terrorism designation just days before Biden took office in 2021, citing Cuba's support for Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro and its harboring of fugitives. Despite the potential for reversal, Biden's decision has been welcomed by human rights groups, including the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, who argue that removing the designation will ease the hardships faced by many Cubans. Cuba's government expressed appreciation for the move, though they considered it limited. They acknowledged that while this action is a step in the right direction, it does not fully rectify the long-standing economic restrictions and policies they deem unjust. Republican figures, such as Senator Ted Cruz and Representative Carlos Gimenez, immediately criticized the decision, calling it unacceptable and vowing to work with the incoming administration to reverse it. Cruz insisted that Cuba continues to advance terrorism, a sentiment echoed by other critics of the Biden administration's approach. As this issue unfolds, it is clear that the fate of U.S.-Cuba relations will be a key point of contention in the coming years, as policy shifts under the Biden administration could quickly be undone by the incoming Trump administration. This has been Sal Pierre, reporting for Sal's U.S. and World News. Stay tuned for further developments on this story.
This is Sal's U.S. and World News, your trusted source for breaking news. I'm Dan Jr. and here's your latest update. Breaking news: Ukraine launches major drone and missile strikes on Russia. Moscow promises retaliation in a dramatic escalation of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine has launched a series of powerful attacks on Russian territory using a mix of US-made ATACMS missiles, British Storm Shadow cruise missiles, and one of the largest drone assaults of the war. The Ukrainian General Staff has confirmed it struck deep into Russian soil, targeting critical infrastructure, including oil storage facilities, refineries, and chemical plants in the Bryansk, Saratov, Tula, and Tatarstan regions, some of which are located over 680 miles inside Russian borders. Among the most significant actions was the launch of 146 drones, which, according to Russia's defense ministry, were intercepted outside the designated war zones. However, Russia acknowledged the destruction of some key targets, including munitions and chemical plants. Furthermore, 2 additional Storm Shadow missiles were reportedly shot down over the Black Sea. In response, Russia's military has vowed retaliation. The Russian Ministry of Defense issued a stern warning, emphasizing that Ukraine's actions, supported by the West, will not go unanswered. This comes after a series of similar attacks last year, including the first use of US and British missiles by Ukraine to target Russian assets. The drone assault, which impacted the Saratov and Engels regions, led to significant damage to industrial sites, including the Crystal Plant oil storage facility in Engels and a major munitions depot at an airbase. Reports suggest that the damage is substantial, with several fires igniting at key facilities, including the Saratov oil refinery and the Kazan Orgsens plant. The war, which began in 2022, continues to escalate, drawing international attention. The conflict has already caused tens of thousands of casualties and displaced millions, resulting in the most severe strain in relations between Moscow and the West since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. In Washington, the situation remains tense as President-elect Donald Trump advocates for a ceasefire and peace negotiations, questioning the future of U.S. support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces continue their pressure on Russian infrastructure, signaling that this conflict is far from over. Stay with us on Sal's U.S. and World News for more updates on this rapidly developing situation. Dan Jr. on Sal's U.S. and World News. This is Sal's U.S. and World News. I'm Jackie Pierre, bringing you the latest updates. Hundreds of miners trapped and feared starving in South Africa's abandoned mine. A tragic and developing story from South Africa. Hundreds of miners remain trapped in an abandoned gold mine, with fears that many have already perished due to starvation or dehydration. This disaster has sparked widespread criticism of the South African government's handling of the situation. The miners, believed to number around 500, have been stuck up to 2.5 kilometers 5 miles underground in the Buffelsfontein gold mine, near the town of Stilfontein, approximately 93 miles southwest of Johannesburg. Many of the miners have been down there since at least November, though local reports suggest some may have been underground since as early as July. Authorities initially attempted to force the miners out by cutting off their food and water supplies. However, groups representing the miners argue that this strategy has only worsened their suffering. They claim the miners are trapped in one of the country's deepest mines and cannot escape due to dangerous conditions and a lack of sufficient support. Human rights groups have condemned the government's response, with some even taking legal action to ensure that basic supplies, like food, water, and medicine, are sent to the miners. While supplies have resumed, they are still insufficient to support all those trapped, and many are reported to be gravely ill. Since the start of the operation, at least 60 bodies have been recovered, and more than 90 survivors have been brought to safety. However, the official rescue operation has been slow. Authorities have stated that it could take weeks to rescue all the survivors and recover the bodies, as the cage being used to lift them can only carry a small number of people at a time. Additionally, the mine's dangerous conditions have led officials to refuse to send down professional rescuers, relying instead on volunteers who are familiar with the mine. Illegal mining, known locally as zama-zamas, is a growing problem in South Africa, particularly in abandoned mines where miners seek to extract leftover gold. However, these operations are often extremely dangerous, with miners relying on ropes, generators, and surface support to survive underground for long periods. The tragic situation at Buffelsfontein highlights the broader issue of illicit mining, which the government says costs South Africa nearly $1 billion annually in lost revenue. As this ongoing disaster unfolds, questions remain about the effectiveness of South African authorities in addressing the root causes of illegal mining and the safety of those involved. Stay with us for further updates on this developing story. This is Jackie Pierre, reporting for Sal's U.S. and World News.
This is Sal Pierre. Thank you for watching. We promise to bring headlines and detailed reports as the events are happening. Please subscribe to the channel, like, and share our videos. You'll be glad you did. See you at the next video.